Most of us have Kenneth Walker III in our top three, but one of us here has him in their top one. All that and more today on a NFL show. I'm your host, Adam Wilde. I'm with my co-host, Chris Allen, and we're joined by a very special friend, Derek Brown. Derek, you might be the one of us that has Kenneth Walker III as your number one running back. So I guess you're going to start there. Today, we're going to talk about Derek's top three running backs in order and his top three wide receivers in order. We'll start with running back because that's supposed to be the fun one. So, Derek, defend yourself. Why is Kenneth Walker III
I will
RB1?
I will explain myself, and I'm having to explain myself out on Twitter and the social media streets because everybody, look, let me start this off by saying this. In the Dynasty social media streets, we always talk about, or at least the community talks about, being different and having a process and having your own process and your own thoughts. And us not talking about the echo chamber or not leaning into the echo chamber. But whenever you step outside the damn echo chamber and you go against consensus, and it's not because I'm trying to be hot takey, okay? That's not it at all. But when you step out against the group think, that's the first thing that everybody says. You're just trying to throw shit against the wall and look, whoop, I don't know if I can cuss on the show, but yeah. I did.
Oh, we decided that.
Oh, yes! Yes, awesome. So this is all to say that, yes, Kenneth Walker is my RB1 in this class. I will adamantly defend it. I'm going to be defending it again later this week, actually tomorrow, in the Fantasy Pros Discord against Andrew Erickson on this point. And it comes down to a lot of different things. And the first thing that people talk about is Kenneth Walker's ability or non-abilities in the passing game. And I understand that he did not catch a lot of passes in college. I get that. I don't think that the divide between Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker as wide receivers or receiving elements in their offenses in college is that far apart outside of target volume. And this can all come down to collegiate offenses, what they do or what they don't, and not be so much a product of skill set. Because you look at Breece Hall, yes, he got targets. I get that. And people always come back to that. And I understand he got targets. But if you look at what he did with said targets, he wasn't uber efficient, people. And all running backs with 20 or more targets and yards per route run in every single season. These are his ranks. 43rd, 52nd, 69th. And although that last year is nice, and we can joke about that, it still is all to say that Breece Hall is not this amazing, otherworldly receiving back that the Dynasty community wants him to be. I understand he got targets, and that's great and grand, but if he didn't show upper tier elite efficiency with them, and it wasn't like he was used in the slot either. The top he was used in all 3 seasons. And if you combine slot and outside rates on snaps, 5.3%. That doesn't scream to me that he is this uber, otherworldly receiving back that the Dynasty community wants to puff him up to be. Now, I'm not shading the guy. I'm not saying that he is not serviceable and he can't play in the passing game. I think he's fine. But to say that there's this massive-ass difference between him and Kenneth Walker in that respect, just because what? He got receptions in college? It doesn't, that divide is not as big of a chasm as everybody wants to play it out to be. And if you flip the coin and look at Kenneth Walker from a rushing perspective, people, he slams Breece Hall straight up on the mat. He bested him in yards after contact per attempt at every single damn season, and he bests him collegiate-wise. He has a large enough sample of almost 500 carries to back this up. You look at also per Russia metrics. His percentage of 10 plus yards or more on his carries is better than Breece Hall by 2%. And he equals him on the nose in breakaway run rate. So if I'm talking about there is not this massive divide in the pass game usage, and the guy that body slams the other guy in the ability as a rusher, then yeah, I don't think it's crazy to say Kenneth Walker is my RB1 in this class at all. And now you're seeing some of the echo chamber come around to some of this. And now we're seeing that the draft community is coming around to this. Daniel Jeremiah came out with his newest top 50 players, and he's somebody that's plugged in. I don't have sources. I will never claim to have sources. But you look at Daniel Jeremiah, Breece Hall was his 29th player overall. Where should you say, where's Kenneth Walker? 31st. They're not that far apart. And yet the Dynasty Twitter community treats it like one of them is amazing and one of them is a woeful tier below the other. And I don't get it, guys. I really don't get it.
So I think it should be Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker the third in the first tier, Isaiah Spiller in the second tier, and then the third tier is guys that I'll trade my picks before I draft, essentially. I mean, come on, there's going to be some guys that I'm going to draft from the later running back tiers, but no one I'm excited about. But when you talk about Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall, here's a little bit of context that we have to play is that where they get drafted is going to flip-flop them so quick because – like you said, they're so close. They're so oh yeah, they're so close. For one,
so if Breece Hall goes at the back end of the first and Kenneth Walker goes in the top of the second or middle of the second, that's going to flip it, or it's going to make that big of a difference?
I don't. I think they're going to get drafted close, so I don't care. But I care what team they go to. Like, let's say that Breece Hall goes and shares touches with DeAndre Swift because I think he would excel in that role, being a 1B to DeAndre Swift. That would suck for DeAndre Swift, right? But that's something that I could see happening because the Lions have multiple first-round picks. I could see them taking a luxury pick. I don't know that they're the greatest team at drafting in the first place. So let's just pretend that that's what happens. Then I'm fine putting Kenneth Walker the third ahead of him. So if the landing – it's not – this isn't CEH being running back 5 and then going to the Chiefs as the first running back off the board and bumping up to running back 1. Right. It's like – Breece Hall, if Breece Hall's a 10, Kenneth Walker's a 9.5 to me. The only difference to me is that I feel like that Breece Hall might go earlier. And if he's the first running back off the board, then I feel like it's a team that's going to invest heavily in him. Now, second running back off the board team might invest heavily in him too, right? Because like you're saying, it might only be 5 picks apart. And if it's 5 picks apart, fine. We'll look at them again and we'll reevaluate. But if Breece Hall is going in the first because a team values that 5th-year option, then I'm going to value Breece Hall a little bit more because, one, I don't want a running back. I don't want to deal with a running back on a second contract. And before the show, I feel like my process got misconstrued. I will not see a running back second contract. I will not. So that's not why I cared about age. I mean, hell, Najee Harris last year was 23.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
Najee Harris was 23, but he was so much better than the other prospects. And I think Najee Harris was definitely better than Devonta.
Good Lord.
Better than Devonta?
That is shade. That is shade for Devonta, man. I think you're going too far with that.
What do you mean? The NFL obviously agreed by a lot.
How? The Steelers paid a first-round pick, and Devonta was in the second round. This is exactly what we talked about.
Which I guess all it takes is one team.
The Steelers paid a first-round pick, which is a lot more money. And they wanted to get, or they could have traded back if they didn't want the 5th round or the 5th-year option on Najee Harris. People care about that. That's why you take a player like that because you care about that. And what was Devonta 20, right?
Yeah,
last year coming out 20.
Yeah, I think so.
So if it was closer, wouldn't Devonta have gone first? Because NFL teams care about that. That's the point I was making. I don't care about that because what I care about is contract years, which is why I don't want to make it to a second contract. I care about
well, okay, let me throw this back at you, Wilde.
Because if they
tell me how many running backs that you keep on your team in Dynasty for the life of their entire rookie contract. Do you keep running backs for the entire 4 years? Or is it more likely that you're going to maybe trade one of those guys in the middle of that rookie deal? Because if that's the case, but what I'm saying is if you play Dynasty in 2 to 3 year windows, and a lot of these players, we're making trades, and even after you do a startup, 2 years later, you look at your team and you say, well, shit, I got 2 guys that were from, or 3 years later, you're saying I got 2 guys from that original startup draft, and a lot of times guys are not even making it through the entirety of their rookie contract on your team, then why does it matter?
Because JT's getting halfway through. So are you saying trade JT right now? Swift is getting halfway through. Are you saying trade Swift right now? Like
you could trade Swift. I'm fine with that. Trade him.
You can
whatever.
That's what I'm saying. You can try. Like if everything were perfect, I'm gonna win in year 1 and 2 with like my old school Leonard Fournettes of the world. Like, give me the running back that's going to get 300 touches in year 1, 300 touches in year 2. He hits peak year 3, and then bam, we're smashing, we're trading. we're getting rid of them, and then we're going to pop in and we're going to draft a Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker this year. And that's the goal. That's like what we should be doing. That's what I'm telling everybody to do. But then you get in a situation where, okay, you're not going to be able to do that with Travis Etienne.
Yeah, but I mean, that's it. That's every injured running back. I mean, like, you just talked about it.
There's a lot.
But you just talked about a scenario where you're trading a guy into the second or third year of you having them in Dynasty, but then we're quibbling over whether they have 4 to 5 years on their rookie deal. I mean, I'm just trying to put it all together, Wilde.
Well, here's another thing. So the person you're going to trade him to knows that there's going to be another year on his rookie contract too, and they're the ones who are assuming that second half of the first contract. So if I'm trading for a running back, that's a plus for me to add in that extra value, because that's something where I can say that I'm going to have that guy for the next 3 years instead of the next 2 years. And again, I don't try to be better than the NFL organizations. I just try to read what so like I'll do all my evaluations, and I wanted to talk to you about like, not the argument between film and analytics, because that's stupid, but like, how do you mesh the two? Because you can do so much work, but then like what the NFL does is what's going to realistically matter, in my opinion. I value what they do a lot more, and I think so much of that at least should revolve around contracts, right? But then Sigmund Bloom's assumption of rational coaching comes in, and maybe it doesn't. So I pay a ton of attention to the contracts. But I guess now it's Chris's turn to be the tiebreaker. Is it Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker at RB1?
At RB1? I don't know, man. I guess my like, why does it have to be one or the other? Well, I guess because
this is why you get paid the big bucks, dude. You literally have to.
No.
I'm playing. You can get the 101 and the 102 if you want.
Right. No, I'm playing. I do think that Breece Hall at 101 makes a ton of sense, but there's a ton of credit to what Derek is saying, where even looking at the metrics for Kenneth Walker, I think there's an argument to be made that he should be placed in front of Breece Hall. I mean, Breece Hall, if you go from the production and even the combine, I mean, 4.38, 4.39 at the combine, of course, everybody's going to freak out. And even from film to analytics, I mean, this is the type of guy that folks would be just slobbering over from an analytical standpoint, because he's breaking a ton of models with the size, weight combination, with also the speed as well. He's got the production, he's got the pedigree. You know, he should be the 101. My thing with Breece Hall is the straight line speed, great, but no agilities, right?
Well, and maybe not no agility, but Kenneth Walker's agility is certainly plus.
Exactly. And so that's where you can see the case for Kenneth Walker. And also to Derek's point as well, I mean, without having the volume that we would expect of a running back. But if you put into context, like coming out of college, I mean, how many running backs like coming out of Michigan, like, are we expecting to have like a ton of receptions anyway? So it's like, okay, so how long has it been since?
I've been waiting to tee that one up.
but that's it, right? That's an outlier. That's an outlier of an outlier. So
I don't even know
contextualizing Walker's situation, that brings up another point of, while we have these thresholds where if folks were to just go to college football database and then look at, how many receptions he had and say like, well, I'm normally looking for 25, 30 receptions. And then, kind of checks that box. But if Walker can't do that, then it's like, whoa. Whereas with Breece Hall, if we still have questions, there's no way that we should be valuing him in the same light as the previous 101s. I mean, is he JT? No. Is he Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, but
no.
We'll run that back to last year. Where is Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker in the big three last year? Because we have a big three all over again, where there's 3 solid running backs and then a big drop off. In most opinion, I mean, you can hype Michael Carter all you want. You're still not going to put him in the same tier as the guys last year.
Absolutely not.
Let's throw Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker in the draft last year. Where do they fall?
I would put them. I think Devonta would probably be in the same tier, if not fairly close to both of those guys. But I mean, anybody else in that class, I mean, Najee, sure. I mean, but the top 2 from the last class, I would say compare fairly well, at least from a value sense.
Who's your third in that one? Because I'm blanking right now. I've been looking at this class too much.
ETN.
Oh, yeah. I had a massive tier break between Devonta and Najee for ETN. I'd put Najee
this year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, same. I don't disagree with that.
Thing.
Like, I think that if you're in rookie drafts, you pay up and you try to get into these two top running backs, or you punt the position and you just load up on wide receivers. Like that's fine, because the next tier of guys that are fighting for my RB3 position, because it is Walker, then it's Hall. I'm between two different guys now. Again, I'm in the middle of going through film and write-ups and looking at all these guys and parsing through all their numbers to the level that I want to be able to like kind of finalize ranks. The two that are kind of fighting it out for RB3 right now are of course Isaiah Spiller, but also Zamir White, because of how he tested, his production, his efficiency on a per touch basis, his and I look at Zamir White as the question mark discount version of Kenneth Walker. He has been uber efficient. I don't give two shits on the fact that he did not run the ball 200 times to Georgia. Nobody runs the ball 200 times to Georgia. Doesn't matter. That's fair. So you're looking at that from college, and as well as him catching passes. Okay, well, they had James Cook there to do that. Right. So what? That's not to say that he can't do it. That's not to say that he can't be serviceable. And let me go back to this point. If you look at these top 3 to 4 guys, every single one of them, I think, are in a really similar basket, although that Dynasty Twinner wants to look at it as Breece Hall, and then there's everybody else as far as pass-catching abilities. Right. I look at all these guys really, really close clustered together. Like, I think Kenneth Walker has more ability than people give him credit for. He displayed soft hands. He didn't get a lot of opportunities. His catch rates were high, and I could point to 2 to 3 different opportunities that he got in college where he was making good catches, whether it was one-handed catches, adjusting to bad balls in the air, what have you, to say that he does have the ability to catch the ball. Now, my whole thing about all these top 3, top 4 running backs is I think they're all have the upside to be serviceable. I don't look at any of these guys as saying, and the guys that we're talking about being in this top 3 to 4, as saying they're going to be world beaters when they catch the ball and how they're going to be used in passing offenses. And so if that's the case, then I don't think that divide between RB1, RB2 is as massive as people says it is. I don't think the divide between RB3 and RB4 is as massive as people possibly say it is. Now, Zamir has a lot of, you could talk about the ACLs, you talk about the injury concerns and stuff like that. Again, if he had one ACL and then he got one in his rookie season, he tore it again or something like that, and then we're going into 2 ACL tears, look, this is not the coffin nail that it used to be 10 to 15 years ago. Guys can recover. Yeah. Does this take some longevity out of his career? Sure. Does he have higher incidence of injuries? Sure. You could say all those things with playing the running back position just in general. So,
dude, I was thinking about yesterday, what running backs don't tear their ACLs at some point in their career at one point, and it's kind of
all scary. Of these guys have been used to hell and back since junior high. All of these guys that get to this point. And we see use injuries. You see this across baseball. How many of these guys get to the major leagues and haven't had a damn Tommy John surgery now? Right. Or a shoulder surgery and all this kind of shit? Because all of these kids are growing up and getting beat to hell and back from the time they're 16 years old. All of these guys that get to the NFL were the best guy in Pop Warner, were the best guy that stepped on the damn field and put on cleats in high school and in college. So outside of certain outliers, all of these guys have been run into the ground since high school. And we want to talk about, they got run into the ground in college. That's been happening their entire life. So just now we're going to talk about, the use of them in the last 3 to 4 years. This has been going on since these guys were teenagers. So all of this and this workload's built up from that point in their lives. So everybody's a damn injury risk given the fact of the position they play in football.
Right. All right, let me bring J Mike's comment into it real quick and then get your take on it, Chris. So J Mike comes in, as much as I love Walker, Breece's receiving production will have NFL decision makers as one of, if not the best pass catcher in the backfield. I think Walker can, but his initial value will be less.
Yeah, I think J Mike kind of hit it on the head, is that while there's still potential for Walker, anybody can take a look at the production, like what we know as of right now, how many targets, how many receptions, like what he's been capable of doing so far. And they'll just look at Breece and just say, yep, he checks all of those boxes. And it's easier for NFL teams to bank on the boxes that they checked with the production that they know versus saying, all right, well, while this guy might not have done it as much, there's going to be some potential there. While I still think that Walker does have that potential in order to be that every down or 3 down back. It's just they'll be able to look at Breece's production and say, all right, well, that's they'll hit the easy button on that. And that's what a lot of teams wind up doing from a process standpoint. They'll just take a look at it like, okay, hits those boxes. He's got the speed. He's got the size. He's capable of catching passes. Checks all those boxes. He's cool. With Walker, it's a little bit of not even a stretch really in my mind, but I can put myself in the shoes of scouts or GMs or somebody in the front office saying that, well, maybe we could put him in this role, maybe we put him in that role, and then wind up selecting him maybe later. So I think what J Mike said is absolutely realistic.
So I'll push back just a little bit with that. Again, I don't have sources, but you listen to people that do. And I harken back, and I'm going to bring up Daniel Jeremiah again. And the reason, one of the reasons he explained about why he moved Kenneth Walker up is because he did get a hold of game or practice film of Kenneth Walker catching a ton of passes in practice. Mm-hmm. And after seeing that, and again, I haven't seen this, but if Daniel Jeremiah is getting a hold of this, we have to believe that NFL teams also can have, or at least possibly have, access to this. So. Yep. With that being the case, I mean, I'll push back against it a little bit, but I mean, again, we're assuming a little bit of the assumption of rational coaching and people doing their due diligence here too. So
absolutely, and that's kind of where it's absolutely possible. But our team's going to actually, take that step in order to say, oh, okay, well, we've got these two guys, and honestly, to be quite honest, if I were a smart NFL team. And if there was even an inkling where I could get the value of, I could get the similar production of Breece Hall, but at a cheaper price than Kenneth Walker, shoot, I probably would just say, oh yeah, y'all go ahead and take it.
Yeah, but if you felt like you needed Breece Hall and you trade back and you miss, because like we said, they're going to be drafted close together. So that's a dangerous proposition. If somebody tries to, if they feel like they need a running back, and we're talking about a huge teardrop between Kenneth Walker and Isaiah Spiller, then teams are going to be afraid to trade back, because as soon as one of Walker, now it's no guarantee that Walker doesn't go first. I mean, like we already alluded to, CEH went first. CEH should, but let me preface that a little bit with CEH was very against the grain for the NFL. The NFL does not like to be wrong. They succumb to groupthink very often, in my opinion, too often, in my opinion. So a lot of times, what you were getting at, Derek, is that like, okay, people are coming around to Kenneth Walker, and I think people should come around to Kenneth Walker because, like we'll talk about in a second, when you turn on film, you can tell that Kenneth Walker can be electric. He can be used in multiple facets, which is what the NFL is looking for right now, and he does catch the ball pretty well. But the thing about that is that the Kenneth Walker conversation is coming up because the Breece Hall conversation has happened for 2 years. So Breece Hall is just like, it's like, not necessarily the shiny new toy, but Kenneth Walker's getting talked about more because what else are we going to talk about right now? So there's also that, and it happens every year. It happened with Trevor Lawrence. People were talking about should Trevor Lawrence go one-on-one after Trevor Lawrence was God gifted to earth for 2 years, because they get talked about so much that it's like, well, maybe I should take Trey Lance. And so I'm not saying that Kenneth Walker doesn't deserve it, but people weren't looking at Kenneth Walker the same way they were about Breece Hall for 2 years. And then to the receiving point, and I know that Kenneth Walker can catch pretty well. He did not get passed to very often, but he can catch pretty well. I also know that A.J. Dillon could catch very well, and they're two totally different backs. But that's a fight that I had to have with that draft class, because you could see that A.J. Dillon could catch the ball pretty well, but he was a big bruiser, and now he was
already pigeonholed into a completely different archetype, though.
No, totally fine, but I'm just having the same argument that Derek's trying to have this year, where it's like one guy caught 50 balls, one guy shown the ability to catch the ball. So some people who value film more is looking at it and saying, look, I understand he didn't meet the threshold, but I can see with my own 2 eyes that the dude can catch the ball at the NFL level. And you can't make the coaches pass the guy the rock more. So that brings me to my question for Derek. Like, Derek, if you had to say on scale, let's say 1 being film doesn't matter at all, and 10 is it's the only thing you look at, like how much are you valuing film in your process?
So, and I'll break it down, man. Like my process with prospects, and I will say this right now, I am not a professional film grinder. I don't have a scouting or a coaching background, any of those things. Happily will admit that to anybody and everybody. My approach when it comes to prospects is before I even turn on the film, I break them down about the things that I care about for numbers' sake. So that differs by every single position. So I look at all of their numbers and I see what that tells me. Then I turn on the film, and then I'll watch guys. Usually, it depends on how much film is out there for every single guy. We don't have the access to all 22 on as many players as other teams and such, and people do. So as much all 22 as I can get my hand on, and as many games as I can possibly watch. Like most of these prospects, it's at least 5 to 6 games minimum that I'm watching. And I try to watch over multiple seasons. I try to get my hands on as many games as I possibly can and watch as much as I can on these guys, because you want to see not only how they look from year to year, but I guess to put a bow on all of this, it's really, I don't want to say 50-50, maybe 60-40 numbers in film. It's really close to... It's really close
just
to...
rate it out of 10. What's film out of 10? Like if 10 were the most important thing, the only thing you look at, are you like a 6.5 in film? Are you a 7 in film? 7?
As far as how much I weighted or how good I am at watching?
No. How much you rate it? Because I guess...
for me, it's a 6.5. I mean, the thing about it is that the things that I see on film, I go back to the numbers and I say, okay, is what I'm seeing on film translatable to the data that I'm also seeing on paper? Are the holes that I'm seeing in this guy's game, or the areas that I think he can improve, or the other parts and pieces of his game? What are the numbers saying on that side of that? And do those two things meet up to kind of paint a picture of said prospect? You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, well, this guy doesn't look like he's very good in pass protection, whether it's a technique thing, whether he's whiffing on blocks. Are they asking him to do it very much? Because now I'm seeing him run a lot of pass routes. He doesn't look explosive or as explosive as he did in 2020 versus 2021. Was he injured? Okay, well, he was healthy both years. What do his numbers look like in both of those years? So it's really just trying to paint the most complete picture that I can on all these different prospects and using a collection of both to do so. Because, like I said, I'm not a master film watcher. I'm not. But I try to marry the two different processes together to come up what I can at least look at being the best Polaroid snapshot that I can get out of a prospect.
And Chris, so Derek, in knowing you, I would have guessed probably 60-40, looking at film and then analytics describing it. And then in knowing you, Chris, I would probably say it's the other way, probably 60% making sure that they're hitting the thresholds that we have known over history to be relevant, and 40% film. Would you say that's fair?
I'd say that's fair, but at least for me, I think my process is almost in reverse of what Derek was talking about, where I will heavily rely on like metrics in order to at least get me started, because that's the easiest thing for me to look at and understand.
Same.
So I can take it. So I can pull down. I can scrape all the information I can from College Football Reference. Once we start getting some size, weight, speed numbers, like things of that nature, and start checking off those boxes. But then if I start to see, all right, well, this guy, he doesn't have a ton of targets, but he is accounting for a lot of his team's production. Okay, so where does he win at? Like, is he good between the tackles? And then that's where you can start to contextualize their game. Like, what type of offense? Like, is this more of a outside zone scheme that he's good, that he happens to be excel in or more efficient in? Like, what type of blocking schemes does he work well with? And is he also getting pass protection? Like where is that at? Because even like places like Pro Football Focus, while they do track that to some degree, that's just more of a binary number that they provide. Whereas we know with pass protection, it doesn't come down to like, did you get the block or not? Were you aware? Like, are you capable of reading the coverage? Like, there's so much that goes into it versus saying,
did you know your
block or you
assignment?
didn't? Exactly. So there's a lot of that comes into play. So that's where I'll try and take as much of that information as possible. And that's where, at least for each prospect, it will tell me where their holes are at analytically. And then you can go to the film and say, all right, well, yeah, they are struggling in pass protection because they're either not setting their feet, or not setting their, not getting their proper leverage, or they're not great in the passing game. They've got stone hands, or they're not great in short yardage because of their size, or whatever the case may be, depending on the prospect. So that's where at least my process might be a little bit different, but I do try and weight both as much as possible, because you need to be able to, you can't just do one without the other, right? You need to have some sort of balance. But at least for me, it's easier for me to find out where those holes are at from a number standpoint, and then the film can kind of contextualize it and also shed a little bit of light on just the nuance of the player's game, where you might not always get that if you just stare at the spreadsheets all day.
I mean, it sounds like we're kind of lockstep, Chris. I mean, I'd say like I'm probably like 60% numbers, 40% film. I think that was kind of where I was leaning. To kind of clean that up or tie a bow on it. But like maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit less. It's really just trying to put it all together, man. And
it depends on the player too, right? Because a lot of us will come in knowing who these, especially the top tier guys. Those guys are easy from a production and metric standpoint because all that information is typically going to be provided for them. It's not hard to like find Breece Hall's numbers or Isaiah Spiller's numbers. And so from there, it does become even more incumbent on us as analysts to figure out, all right, well, we have all the data about them, but we really need to understand, well, what is their superpower? And that's where we can figure that out by watching a lot of the film. But for guys like, let's say, Zamir White, James Cook, guys that just aren't as well known, Rachaad White, I mean, insert name here, that's where it becomes even more incumbent for your process to be as thorough as possible, because in actually balancing both of those things, because the information might not be as readily available for each of those guys. You might have to hunt a little bit for where they're at, like what type of, like how they were used on the field, like what situations are they best involved in? I mean, all of that stuff, so you can get a more complete picture of your prospect.
And for those guys and some of the lesser known guys are not lesser known, but for me, then sometimes I'll lean into more of the numbers because of the film, and that's really what it comes down to, because some of the film, I won't have access to as much film for some of these guys as opposed to others, so then I'll have to lean more into the numbers aspect for them if I just don't have it available too. So I agree.
Yeah. I'm not grinding Sincere McCormick's tape. I'm probably not going to do that. I'm telling you that right now. I ain't doing that.
So if you're listening into the show and you're like, look, man, I don't have time to be like, what do I need to do in terms of film? Because for starters, I believe you do have to watch a amount of film.
Sure.
So what do you need to do? In my opinion, what you need to do as someone who's casually preparing for a rookie draft is watch enough film to know what somebody's great at and what they're bad at. You don't need to know what their hit bin looks like. You don't need to know if they've got fast twitch on inside zones, if they can read their assignments well, even the level of vision. Just know what they're great at and what they're not good at. That's going to give you a good enough idea to contextualize the threshold markers that you're going to be looking for, those 25 catches. We don't need to care about 40 time anymore. We didn't really need to before, but now we've got GPS data, so you don't even really need to care about that. But there are thresholds that people are going to hit, and you can go ahead and contextualize that and say, well, I know that Kenneth Walker is very agile. And now I kind of see that in the numbers, or I kind of see that what he did previously. That's typically enough for somebody who's just sniffing around, got a few leagues. But I will preface that by saying, like, there are examples, for example, Matt Waldman. If you're Matt Waldman and you know everything about a player, then you know that, well, Trey Sermon was his running back one, so I guess he wasn't ever going to take him all the way off the board. But as soon as that Trey Sermon got drafted to the 49ers, it just wasn't going to work out. And I don't necessarily remember if Matt admitted it or not, but he knew that Trey Sermon was not going to excel in that offense. It was pretty much the exact opposite of an offense that he was going to excel in. And then on the hindsight of that, Eli Mitchell, that was actually the exact perfect offense for a guy that could read the holes and hit the holes so quickly and powerfully as Elijah Mitchell did. So that's all in hindsight for people like us. But if you were someone like Matt Waldman, maybe you saw that right away. So if you had time to become the Matt Waldman of the world, you could, and that would provide you a huge advantage in your rookie drafts. But at least check out enough film to just see what this guy's great at and what this guy sucks at.
Yeah.
So that's going to lead us into the wide receivers. We're going to break those
hold
guys
on, we got
down.
a question in the chat.
Oh, my bad. Let me bring that up. Oh, I love going live. How much of an argument can you make for guys like Rozier? Yes, without draft capital.
Oh, so talk to me about Rachaad White, Derek, because I've heard at least a decent amount of hype. Like, while he's not going to see, I mean, for me, he's probably there's probably a ton of guys in tier 3 for me. He probably fits somewhere in there, and probably, I'm guessing, late day 2, maybe early day 3 for Rachaad White.
Let me interrupt you and read it better for the listening audience. All of this being said, how much of an argument can you make for guys like Zamir or Rachaad without draft capital?
Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, from the hype that I'm hearing as of right now, it's just the receiving aspect of White's game makes him a guy that most folks are going to be targeting, or at least we're gonna try and find what he could be depending on like what team tries to take him at this point. But I don't know. Like, I was hearing some comments like before we went live that you're just like, maybe pump the brakes a little bit.
I mean, I'm pumping the brakes a little bit because it seems like the NFL, or at least like, scouts and what have you, are pumping the brakes a little bit. Like, without knowing draft capital, I mean, a lot of what I go to is, you can all look this up. Free website. If you go to grindingthemocks.com, this is like this website, and the person that runs it collates all these mocks from months and months up until now. And you're looking at Rachaad White has an expected draft position, so EDP of 112.6. That's going to drop him into the fourth round. Maybe he drops even lower than that. Now, I think he's probably a fourth round pick, but if you're looking at like him versus Zamir White's at 92. So, I mean, we're looking at Zamir White. He's not leaving the third round. And that round might not make a massive, massive amount of difference considering what situation if they go to. Like, if Rachaad White gets just airdropped into a perfect situation where he can at least has the upside to maybe be the guy year one. Maybe like in Atlanta, where that looks a lot more congested than it obviously should be, considering everybody in there is on a 1-year deal. And the team told us they wanted to get a running back in the top 2 rounds last year. So could they address the position this year? Regardless of they got everybody and their mama that's coming out of the geriatric home on a 1-year deal. Doesn't matter to me. This is all to say that I use a lot of different resources, whether it's listening to podcasts of people that are plugged in, or using websites like this that collate all the mocks and give us somewhat of a semblance or an idea of where guys can be drafted at. And sometimes that's at least at this stage of the game where I'm going as far as like differentiating between these two and trying to get an estimate or a finger on the pulse of draft capital.
If I had to guess, though, I'm assuming that Zamir's probably going to have the leg up just because of pedigree, right? I mean, he has the big school name. Versus White,
that's what Brian Robinson's riding on right now. I mean, Brian Robinson's going like he's getting talked about going round 3, round 4 as well. He didn't have a massive productive collegiate career, but he went to Alabama. He got a lot of volume. Yeah. He's projectable. NFL teams know what they're going to get out of him. Is he sexy? No. Is he going to just pop off the page when you go to look at stats? No. But I mean, again, it's a case of NFL teams could like him more than. Like, I won't be surprised at all if Brian Robinson gets drafted ahead of Rachaad White, and then Dynasty Twitter just goes full nuclear and melts down and talks about, like they do every single year, about how NFL teams are so freaking stupid and they are so intelligent. And I'm not saying that NFL teams don't do stupid stuff. Don't get me wrong, because they do.
Sure.
But to say, like, we are also not inside of NFL war rooms. We don't know what their big boards look like. And depending on what the role that they're going to ask the guy to play, he might be perfect for the role they're asking out of him. You know, so all of these things matter.
Yeah, and I think for Rachaad White, the easy case to make is just for the receiving production. Like, that's like he is a built-in, like, I don't think from a size perspective you can make the same case, but think about the guys in the league right now that are your third down, 2-minute hurry up offense type of guys, and White kind of fits into that role, like without any question. So it's just absolutely is the team that needs that type of role. Like, say if he were to fall to like Tampa, it's over after that. But it becomes, but that's where, again, without knowing draft capital, it's just what is their role, and that's typically how I try and look at each of those prospects. Like, what is your superpower? Like, what would you be able to offer a team? And if you're not going to be that like first and second down grinder, goal line back, a guy like Rachaad White, I think he falls into that category where if you need a pass catching back, if you need a third down guy, a guy in the 2-minute drill, that's where he kind of falls into play for me.
But then he ends up in like a really good comparison would be Darrington Evans. It's kind of the role that you're looking for. And then that's going to take me into a sharp left turn for you guys, because I think you guys explained that question great. I don't have anything to elaborate on except for at how little excitement that we're generating for these RB3, RB4, RB5s, or sorry, RB4, RB5, RB6. At what point are we looking to trade into 2023 this year, as opposed to other years when we're looking at this and saying these aren't first round dynasty picks in any other year that I've played? Am I going to force myself to make these picks this year because I have the pick? Or at what point are we going to start looking to move to 2023 after we recognize that? Because do you guys really want to argue over Rashad White or Zamir White?
No.
Or do you want to get a 2023 pick out of them?
Depends on where the pick is.
Yeah, I would say if you got a late first at this point, you can already kind of gauge how these, whether it's, folks like Ryan McDowell and those types of, they've been running mocks essentially for the past month and a half at this point. So you can kind of gauge what the super flex or even 1QB, if you play in the Stone Age and you play those 1QB type of leagues. But
yeah, it's a little different.
You should be able to gauge how those drafts are going to go. So if you're sitting at the 109, 110 or something like that, and staring down the barrel of having to pick one of these guys that we're talking about, or even once you get into the mid-second, if that's going to be if your pick falls in that area where you might have to look at having to draft one of the Rashad White or Zamir or somebody like that, then now would be the time for you to start thinking about moving that pick so that you're not stuck in that position and trying to move it on draft day when the rest of your league mates know you're going to be stuck.
Already know, and they're not excited about Zamir White either because they know where he got drafted. Yeah, that's a great point.
Well,
go ahead, Garrett.
So the other side of the coin with this is we always talk about trades in a vacuum and things like that. The other thing that we need to contextualize here is you have to have the offers. Right now, this class versus the 2023 class, everybody is kind of okay, well, this class is not that great. Maybe wide receiver wise and stuff like that, but the quarterback class overall is getting shit on. The running back class outside of the top 2, maybe 3 guys, hell, maybe 4. You want to throw Zamir, whatever. But outside of the top 3 to 4 guys, it's getting shit on as well at the running back position. So if you're sitting at the back end of the first, you might only get what if somebody tosses at you a 2023 second and you don't know where that second's going to be? Hell, for all we know, people's teams could get kiboshed and blown to hell and back, and this could be a late 2023 second. At that point, no, probably not going to move it. I'll just stay and pick. Or I'll try to move it in a different trade and not just go straight up for picks, pick for pick.
Add them for an upgrade. That's what you're probably going to have to do.
Yeah, because that's what it really comes down to as well, is people are lower on this class. And the other thing is, if there's not somebody on the board at that moment that they're willing to sit here and trade into, or that they're ravenous over, you might be stuck picking, because of the other side of the coin is okay, maybe one of these sexy guys or unsexy players gets top 3 round draft capital, or the Kadarius Toney of the world happens this year. Some wide receiver we do not foresee goes round 1 or round 2, and everybody's like, yeah. And they're like, I don't want to draft that guy, but he got the draft capital. The better move might be to stay and to pick that guy, even though you don't like him that much. The NFL likes him more than we do, because even though you might not like him that much, and this is a perfect case for in Superflex. If you're not big on this quarterback class, the smarter move in a lot of instances might be to stay and pick and take the quarterback, in the sense of, okay, the cheapest spot you get quarterbacks in Superflex is in a startup or in the rookie draft. So even though I'm not getting offers that make sense that I'm flipping this pick for more right now in the draft, maybe that happens later in the offseason. Maybe that happens week 1, week 2, week 4 of the NFL season. If it's not right now, the smarter move, if you don't have the offers and considering people's thoughts on this class and the 2023 class, it might just be to stay and pick and wait.
Well, yeah, you're definitely right. Every league's different in that you have to have the offers, but I guess I'm talking more about being more aggressive than other drafts. So, for example, J Mike in the chat. So I felt like the Henry Ruggs draft class was incredibly deep, and it turns out it was pretty deep. And I traded a first round pick next year that should have been late, and then my team ended up being terrible. But I traded him what I thought was going to be a 2022 late first for Henry Ruggs, because I felt like Henry Ruggs was a first round talent. He was very boom bust. And I remember talking with you, Chris, understanding that. I was like, if Henry Ruggs is going to hit, he's going to hit big. And if he's going to fail, he's going to fail big. I'm worth taking that risk. So I traded a first in the next year for the 201. I'm thinking in this year, I might be looking in one quarterback leagues at you're going to have to get aggressive with the 108, trying to send the 108 straight up for for a first and hoping that, you hope that it's better than the 108 the next year, but you also can consider that maybe the 112 next year is better than the 108 this year, and then that works out too. But that's something, like you said, Chris, you probably have to do that right now, because if we're all staring down the barrel at Zamir White, that was a late third round pick at pick 10, nobody's taking that pick off you. So then now we're to Derek's point. You have two options. You draft, and luckily for us, we might get 7 first-round wide receivers. That is in the realm of possibility, that we get 7 first-round wide receivers, and then we don't have to care about Zamir White or Rashad White in the first round, because it doesn't matter. You just take whatever first-round wide receivers left and hope it works out. And even if we don't get 7 in the first round, we're still going to get at least 5, and then we're going to have some early seconds in there. So hopefully the wide receivers save us. But I'm just saying, once you're staring down the barrel, these wide receivers didn't get the landing spots that you wanted them to get, and you're saying, I either got to take Zamir White or Rashad White in the first round, you're either too late or you package them for a player, because you probably aren't getting a first-round pick straight up in 2023 for it. So now we'll hit on wide receivers. I think there's a lot less argument with this one, which is good, because we took most of our time on this running backs. Derek, you can kick us off with your first wide receiver off the board in 2023 rookie drafts.
So I just, as of yesterday, I had Garrett Wilson as my wide receiver 1 in this class. Today I finished his profile, and I have since flipped that for right now. Drake London is my wide receiver 1 of this class. I talk about a lot of reasons for that, but Wilson's number 2, and right now I still have to watch Jameson Williams, but him and Burks are vying for wide receiver 3. Now, the reason that I put Drake London at wide receiver 1 is he was a stone cold alpha this last season at USC, and the numbers that he put up and the way that he put them up was just jaw-dropping fantastic. And I don't think that his end of the season numbers really do him justice for people to understand that, like, the guy only played 8 games, and yet amongst all FBS receivers, he was 19th in targets, 14th in receptions. Like, the guy was averaging 14.8 targets, 11 receptions, and 135 receiving yards per game. If he'd have played the entirety of the collegiate season, his numbers would have been stone cold ridiculous. Like, he was putting up video game type numbers on a per game basis. He's got the early breakout age. He was fighting for targets with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Michael Pittman. So you can talk about the competition things, the same things that you could talk about with Garrett Wilson. I know Wilson earned more targets, or at least at a better clip over his last 2 seasons. And that's really what it comes down to. And part of the risk of taking maybe somebody like Drake London as your wide receiver 1 over Garrett Wilson, or even Treylon Burks, is because with Wilson and Burks, we have a 2-year history of them being top 15, top 20, and whether it's looking at target share, yards per route run, all these different metrics, versus Drake London as a guy that really, outside of early breakout age and him doing it when he got to USC the first year, elite upper echelon type of season. We only have a 1-year sample of that out of Drake London. Now he's stupid young. Like, he's 20 years old right now.
Like, barely 20.
Exactly. Like, so you're talking about, again, Garrett Wilson didn't break out until he was 20. Treylon Burks broke out. I want to say his breakout age was a little bit later as well. I could be wrong off the top of my head. It wasn't 18 though. But the reason that I push Drake London above those two is, one, I have a lot of questions about Treylon Burks and his transition to the NFL. He is a massive divide guy as far as matching up tape and numbers. His numbers say he is otherworldly badass. His film and how he was used in college paints a little bit of a different picture and makes him a little bit more of a projection in my eyes. Versus a guy like Drake London, we've seen him play in the slot. We've seen him play out wide. And the type of ceiling that I've seen out of Drake London, even in that 1 year, shows me that, like, his ceiling could be, if he hits his upper echelon range of outcomes, he could be ridiculous at the NFL level based off of what he did on a per game basis at USC. Like, we're talking about a guy that was top 5 in yards per route run, top 5 in He was top 12 in yards per route run against man coverage and zone. He led. He was up near the leaderboard in contested catches and contested catch rate. He has the size, the ability, and the speed to play, and he can play on the inside and outside. And for everybody, and I know the big thing about Drake London is he can't separate. I honestly, I don't know what people are watching when they say that. Like, I've watched Drake London's tape. I watched it versus press coverage, and I've seen him separate. I've watched him on short area routes and out routes. I've seen him separate. I've seen him separate deep. He showed a leap from 2020 to 2021 and the nuance of his route running, and as well as he was a big slot wide receiver for the first 2 years at USC. He didn't transition to being an outside wide receiver until this last season, and that's when we saw him explode. The other flip side of this coin is, what if they used him as an outside wide receiver during his entire 3 seasons at USC? Would he have been putting up damn good numbers? But again, then we're talking about he had Amon-Ra St. Brown and Michael Pittman there.
Right.
So that's why I put him above the other two guys. Whereas, and that's really just where I'm taking the swing on his absolute upside. And it's not to say that I'm not throwing shade at Garrett Wilson. I really like him as a prospect. There's a reason why he's going to go first round in the NFL draft, and he deserves that shit. But in breaking both of these guys down and trying to sit here, and maybe this is me going more for the fences, if they hit their upper echelon outcomes, I could see Drake London being an unquestioned alpha, and him just dominating shit. Whereas Garrett Wilson, I like him a lot, and I see wide receiver 1 type of upside in his range of outcomes, but I do have a few more concerns about his game, even though the analytics say Wilson and Burks should be above them. This is one of those things where we're talking about putting the entire package together on guys where they check the boxes and where they're at, and me saying I lean into the type of ceiling that I could possibly project this player to hit versus collegiate guys where we've seen 2 years of them doing it versus a guy where we've seen 1.
This is such a strange year where you're going to have 3 wide receivers at the top that are so incredibly different, but are going to be so incredibly similar in draft capital, in ceiling. So you mentioned ceiling, Derek. So that's a reason that you have Drake London at the top, because you feel like his ceiling, and we should shoot for ceiling outcomes, by the way, in rookie drafts. His ceiling outcome is the highest. I felt as if Treylon Burks' ceiling outcome is the highest, but I feel like Treylon Burks needs a way better situation. If there's 15 teams that work out for Drake London in the NFL, maybe there's only 7 or 6 for Treylon Burks. So I agree that it's harder for Treylon Burks to hit his ceiling, but I think if he does land in one of those situations, his ceiling is top 12. And by the way, Jamar Chase couldn't separate either, right? So that's that's turning into a very ambiguous term. It's like, oh, the guy just can't separate because he's big. It's like guys separate differently. And if you want to learn, maybe I won't be the one to teach you, but listening to Matt Waldman or guys like that, and they'll tell you, yet he separates. It just looks different. He's a big dude. It's going to look different in the way that he separates as opposed to how Tyreek Hill separates. Tyreek Hill is going to be faster than everybody. He's going to be more agile than everybody. That does not mean that Drake London and Jamar Chase were not creating separation. They're creating separation differently. Now, this is something I want to pose to both of you, because I think we need to crumple up some of the process that we've had over the years in such a strange situation this year and start looking at the fact that maybe going first at wide receiver is not necessarily going to be the best for the prospect that we want to succeed the most. Now, if Drake London goes to the Jets, is that necessarily a better thing than if, say, like we talked about, you didn't like the fit, but if Treylon Burks went to the Packers, is it necessarily better that Drake London went 9 to the Jets? Or is it better that Treylon Burks gets 22 to the Packers? So that's going to be an interesting dynamic where it's like, if we've got 5 to 7 wide receivers in the first round and they're all so close, maybe you're not giving a huge plus bonus to the team that goes to the shitty team. I mean, what do you think about that, Chris?
No, I like that. And I think that it really, as fantasy gamers, and hopefully and it seems like the NFL at large has started to come to the realization that, while, everybody from Jameson Williams to Treylon Burks all the way down to guys like, David Bell, they all have the wide receiver tag, but they're not playing the same game. David Bell and Jameson Williams, they ain't playing the same game. So when you say that you're looking for a wide receiver, it's almost like I think about that scene from like Forrest Gump where Bubba's going through all the different types of shrimp, like all the different types of gumbo and all that. It's the same thing with wide receivers. Like, you want a Z receiver, you want a speed receiver, you want a clear route guy, you want a route running guy, you want a small route running, a small slot receiver, you want a super fast guy. I mean, that's what this draft class offers. And that's what all these different receivers bring to the table. And trying to understand not just draft capital, but fit with the team. Those are the two things that you really need to have, like when you're studying this class. It's not like with running backs. Like, we can talk about each of these running backs essentially in a vacuum because we know what their skill sets are. We know what they're capable of. Like, their college production shows us this. But in translating wide receiver talent to the NFL, that's where you have to really get into the weeds. You have to understand the nuances to their game. Like, is Treylon Burks as good of a route runner as Drake London? To me personally, I think London has that in spades on Burks. But it's just with Burks' speed, can you see a team valuing that more? And so then that's where that conversation needs to be had. So I think that's where it becomes a bit harder to evaluate each of those guys because there are just so many different skill sets that they bring to the table. And having at least 5 that we're talking about here in the first round, I mean, that's where it makes it even more exciting because it forces you, like we were talking about earlier, about having a process, either whether it be relying on film, whether it be relying on analytics, meshing the two together, what have you. That's where it's important to put that process together and figure out, okay, well, this is how I'm evaluating this player, but then also trying to figure out what is their fit going to be. Because again, a guy like Drake London, absolutely no problems with him being the wide receiver 1. But then now after the draft, we need to talk about what is his fit going to be, because I can squint and see some of the positives of him being drafted first and going to a team like the Jets. But then it's just, are they going to be able to utilize him to his full strength? That's where I don't know.
At least he's already played with a bad quarterback.
Well, yeah. It can't get much worse than that.
So the flip side of that coin, and I think it's a really interesting conversation with wide receivers too, as opposed to being running backs, is how much do we dive into, because we do this every single year. We talk about it, people, repeating the same mistakes or going through the same processes, okay? How much do we weigh with wide receivers, specifically landing spot versus talent? And are you betting on talent or are you betting on landing spots? Like, to me, when it comes to the wide receiver position, and some of this boils down just to the simple fact of, I believe that targets are earned. And that you need to have talent to earn them. And if I believe that you have talent and you're more talented than other said player, then, I mean, if we're parsing through landing spots, and the other thing about it is we could see, and I think that's funny about landing spots, because how much does the NFL landscape change in 1 year, 2 years?
Yeah.
How much have we seen it change just in this offseason? So considering all those different factors, honestly, like, give me the talent, and I'm going to side with the prospect evaluation. If the draft capital, if all these guys go in the first round, if all of them go in the first round, to me, I'm going to look at that as a wash. And I'm going to come down to it and say, okay, I want the guy that I think has the best ability, the best skill set, and the best ability to earn targets. Because if the cream really does rise to the top and all these guys get the same damn draft capital and they're going to get the same opportunities or similar chances to earn opportunities in their first 2 seasons in the NFL, that's where I'm going to go back and say, okay, I'm going to lean on the process and the prospect eval and the talent of said player over landing spot. Because landing spot and the dynamics around that can change just like that.
Yeah.
Yes, but does it? Because how many of these teams are in the perennial top 10 picks? Because let's say this. If AJ Brown, that was stupid. Okay, that was stupid. For all of us, it was stupid that he dropped when he did, when he went to the Titans. Titans aren't a perennially terrible team. I'm going to tell you this. If Garrett Wilson goes to the Commanders, and if Drake London goes to the Jets, and if Treylon Burks goes to the Packers, they are all so close to me that it's easy for me to take Treylon Burks. And if that means that I trade back a little bit because he's not there for everyone else, totally fine with that. But I will consider the Jets a dink. I will consider the Commanders a dink. We talked about it before the show. I don't know that I'm considering the Packers a plus, but I am at least considering them a neutral. So in that sense, with those guys so incredibly close, I will give it to the Packers landing spot. Now, on the flip side, I support what you were saying. It's different every year because when Clyde Edwards-Helaire jumped from running back 5 to running back 1, I was never a supporter of that because he was running back 5 because we worked really, really, really hard on that evaluation. And we felt really good about the 4 running backs in front of him. You cannot throw all that in the trash because he's going to play with the Chiefs who not even necessarily in hindsight, they didn't utilize the running back to the amount that we would have needed for him to be worth a first-round Dynasty startup. So I was never there, and I will never apologize for not being there. So with these wide receivers, it's different because they are so close. Like I just moved Garrett Wilson to 1, and I've got Burks at 2 and Drake at 3, but I won't even argue it with Drake and Burks. I do think that Garrett Wilson does enough better in route running that he does get my running back or wide receiver 1 spot for now. But they are so close that if you give them a wash for them all being in the first round, and then you just say, well, I got to take a little bit off for the Jets and a little bit off for the Commanders because when you take a draft pick, you also take a piece of that organization, and I don't want any piece of I do like Robert Saleh. So maybe the Jets could turn it around to your point, but I don't see the Commanders ever turning it around in my lifetime. So I'm not trying to invest in another Terry McLaurin. I mean, another Josh Doxson. Who succeeded there? No one. No one's going to succeed there.
Terry hasn't been like a top 10 wide receiver, but he's been top 20 in both seasons. Yeah. And he was better than that, but he was better than that in the first year, but then he got hurt and he was hampered all down the season. So, I mean, again,
he was top 24.
This last season?
I thought he was top 24. Oh, maybe on per game. Oh, did he? Because he might not have played the whole year.
Yeah.
But I guess with Terry, though, he is a lot better than the top 20 wide receiver, in my opinion. His ceiling should be a lot higher than what it is. And he is certainly being held back by the fact that he's been stuck with Taylor Heineke, Alex Smith, Case Keenum, the list goes on.
And now Carson Wentz.
That organization has, and now Carson Wentz, in ways that organization has held players back that should have a lot more potential. Antonio Gibson, the list goes on.
Yeah. He's the next Allen Robinson, at least at this point. Like from that narrative, like he is the next Allen Robinson.
That's an interesting point. I don't know if he's played. Yeah, I don't know if he's had better quarterbacks than Allen Robinson, to be quite honest with you.
Nope.
Well, so let's talk about this again for landing spots. Okay. What if Wentz is only there this year, or he's only the starter this year, and Washington drafts one of these great quarterbacks next year? What if they, and we're saying great, what if they get a CJ Stroud? What if they get a Bryce Young? What if they get a Levis next year? I mean, we're talking about landing spots so much. Wilde, does that change the dynamic?
Yeah.
If they get a different quarterback next year?
Yeah, that's fair. But I also think that they're going to be too good to get in the top 5. I think they're going to be like 10.
Maybe.
Like 10
they could be dog water this year. I mean, it's possible. That defense isn't good this year.
Okay.
Carson Wentz shits his pants. Like these are possibilities. Yeah.
So that was a top 5 defense last year before the season started, and it ended up being like 30th, 20, like terrible defense. So I don't know. And I think they lost a couple guys too. So maybe it doesn't turn around, but that defense was supposed to be good. As much as wrong with that organization, I do think Ron Rivera is a decent head coach. I think they screwed themselves out of one of those great because they're going to go bam, bam, bam again, top 3, top 4. So I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I think
I can't bank on it either.
Well, and to revisit another part about Terry McLaurin, I'll own up to this. He was wide receiver 29 in fantasy points per game. His counting stats weren't bad, but I think it came down to touchdowns and honestly the wide receiver because he still had 1,053 yards, but only 5 receiving touchdowns. So I think that's kind of where you're looking at the divide being. Like if he gets, and I'd have to go look back at it. Yep.
He'll drag himself to 1,000 every year, but it's just gonna. He's the only show in talent because unfortunately Miami didn't step up, and it's just going to be so hard to get another guy in there. They're almost definitely going to take Garrett Wilson because I see Drake London being drafted to the Jets so often, and
I think Garrett Wilson needs to go to the Jets. I know we're not.
I would like that.
Fitz.
I don't mind that.
I
Yeah, I would like it.
really like his skill set. And honestly, every mock draft we've done, or at least most of the ones we've done for Fantasy Pros so far, I want to say the times that I've had the pick for the Jets, I've actually mocked Drake London to them. I'm actually flipping that. As long as Wilson doesn't go ahead of them, like I know in some mocks he's going to the Falcons at 8.
Yeah, I've seen
I
him
really
top
like
that.
him. I like him going to the Jets, and it being a really good fit for his skill set. With how Ohio State used him, I mean his yak ability is for real. Like if they get him into that offense and they scheme up easy completions for Zach Wilson, use him on shallow crossers. He was used on jet sweeps and stuff like that. I don't think it's insane to look at Garrett Wilson, and I'm not going to say the Deebo Samuel role and he's going to be a wide back, but can they use him and get him into space and use him as an easy completion weapon for Zach Wilson? I'd really love that fit for the Jets.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think he would essentially replace, like to me, I would hope he would replace Corey Davis, because I think if the combination of Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, that's fire right there, to be quite honest.
Well, Corey Davis is a big cap hit, so they'll at least have him next year. I think we just talked about that last week, actually. We were mentioning how different that team's going to be, and Corey Davis might be cut in 2 years. So that would work out with, but if someone has to be the sacrificial lamb, give them the best route runner. So I guess to play devil's advocate against myself, Garrett Wilson is enough of a technician to succeed in both locations if he must, but I prefer if he didn't. I would even prefer the Falcons more than those two, just because I guess I trust them more? I mean, the Jets have been top 10 for the last 5-6 years, at least top 10 picks.
I mean, but the other side is that organization was run by a ton of buffoonery. I mean, you look at what Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh are having to like dig themselves out of. Like legit,
totally
it's the most,
you can't expect much from them.
It's them and the Texans as far as like being the most talent bereft teams in the NFL and saying, here's the shit sandwich that we're handing you, and don't take a bite of it, but just look at it. Yeah, look at it and stare at it and try to spit shine this.
Right.
You know, I think that like you were looking at massive like 3 to 4 year, like these were even worse teams than even the Lions. Like Dan Campbell didn't even walk into as bad of a situation as Saleh and even Lovie Smith is right now. You know, so you know, it was horrible and terrible over the last few seasons with what they did with draft picks. And dear God, nobody should ever let Adam Gase near another damn war room ever.
That's insane.
Freaking idiot.
Before we get out of here, let's try not to spend 20 minutes on this, but it's probably going to be difficult.
Good luck.
Joshua Jones said, "We don't hate Elijah Moore, do we?" Well, as a matter of fact, I think that Elijah Moore is incredibly overvalued in Dynasty right now, but I'll let Derek go first as the first guest on an NFL show, episode 2. Is Elijah Moore, do we hate him?
I don't hate him, but I am baking into how I'm valuing him that the Jets do draft a wide receiver in the top part of this draft. And if that's the case, then the question that you have to ask yourself is, how well do I feel about Zach Wilson and his ability to support multiple wide receivers? There's a very, very different conversation that you have to have with yourself in the mirror and saying, can Zach Wilson support Elijah Moore and a bunch of schmoes versus can Zach Wilson support Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson? Can Zach Wilson support Elijah Moore and Drake London? And what does that do to Elijah Moore? Him being the one show pony in town is a very, very different set of circumstances and competing with targets against Corey Davis and Braxton Berrios versus him competing for targets against a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. So I will say this. For me, and baking that into how I view Elijah Moore right now, I am probably lower on Elijah Moore, even though I think I have him ranked. He's inside my top 24 Dynasty wide receivers right now because, again, that has not come to fruition. But how I'm valuing him in trades and looking at the NFL draft, I am probably lower than consensus on him.
No, and I think that's kind of how I'm looking at him too, because if you think about what our expectations were coming into year one, at the very least, we were hoping to see him shine a bit more than he did. And I know that everybody, it's almost like you're betting on the come, like you're expecting that year 2 breakout, if we can see that. But if we're already talking about the Jets, like you were just talking about, Derek, about them possibly drafting another wide receiver, another first round like wide receiver, which brings in automatic target competition for him. We've already got the concerns about Zach Wilson. While Elijah Moore was efficient last year, if I remember, like his yards per route run were almost identical to Jalen Waddle's, and everybody loves Jalen Waddle at this point. So it's like if he showed flashes of efficiency. I mean, he wasn't like totally used out of the slot, so he did show at least some of that route running that we expected to have for him. So it's just like the tools are there, but it's just not being able to meet expectations for fantasy gamers. I think it does kind of leave him in the overvalued state that we find ourselves in right now.
So I want to throw a question to y'all real fast, because I think that if we were to take a poll about Dynasty consensus, I think Elijah Moore would win this poll. But I want to know, who would you take straight up if you were in a startup draft? You're on the clock, and both of these guys are there. Wilde, I want to kick this to you first, man, because I don't know if I got a feel on where Chris leans with this, but are you taking Elijah Moore or are you taking Devonta Smith?
Devonta Smith.
Okay.
100%.
Now, do you think Dynasty Twitter would agree with you on that?
I pulled up DLF's rankings because I knew that you were going to pull some stuff like this. Devonta Smith is wide receiver 17 for them, and Elijah Moore is wide receiver 20 for them. But
okay, so same tier. But I don't think that people realize, this is where this gets running around in my head. You have rookie wide receivers that people are super high on. They point to metrics like yards per route run, and it's a great metric in forecasting future ability. The other wide receivers that are in that same tier from that type of metric from Jalen Waddle is also, like we're talking about, Elijah Moore. It's also Devonta Smith. He's in that same thing.
Very efficient.
But I think if you were to go and you were to say Jalen Waddle is valued way higher, even with Tyreek Hill trade, because people will dig their heels in and stuff like that. He was way higher. I had him ranked higher. That's fine. He is valued above Elijah Moore and Devonta Smith. And I think if you were to toss a poll out there, and I could be wrong, I could be reading the room wrong, but I think that the stink around Jalen Hurts is high enough to where I think that other people were willing to talk themselves into it. Elijah Moore is going to be valued above Devonta Smith, and I think it's wrong. And I know DLF has them in the same tier, and Devonta Smith is ranked higher again, but we're talking about, you flip this to your leagues or you throw this out onto social media and you're trying to get the consensus of people. I don't know, man. I think that Elijah Moore is valued over Devonta Smith, and I don't agree with it.
I'm with you.
So much of Elijah Moore's ranking right now is based on perceived value, and it's really scary when you get into those guys. Darnell Mooney's another one. Both players I like too, by the way. I like Elijah Moore and Darnell Mooney, but so much of their value is based on perceived production that it's like they're already at the value that they're going to be at when they reach the production that you perceive them to get, if they do get it. So then it's like, are you gaining anything out of that? Because when I'm investing in a player in Dynasty, I also at least have in the back of my mind, like, how many outs do I have, to use a poker term, to making some back on this player? Like, if my team just goes to total hell, can this player dig me out of that hole? Am I going to get increased value on that player? Someone like Courtland Sutton is that guy for me right now. Now, he unfortunately got the little value bump from Russ, but before the value bump from Russ, it was like, I think that Courtland Sutton's being undervalued in consideration of what we've seen from him so far. So then I throw out a bunch of trades for Courtland Sutton. I noticed that Courtland Sutton was already on a lot of my teams, actually, but the opposite of that is trying to acquire Elijah Moore right now, trying to acquire Darnell Mooney, because if they don't hit that perceived value, that value is going to tank. And they were already not way too high if they hit their value, but they were already so high that you go up maybe 1, 2, 3 spots. Maybe Elijah Moore gets even farther ahead of Devonta Smith. But that's the point that I'm making, is like, if you go try to acquire those players right now, they're being valued as if they're basically the wide receiver ones in their offense and going to be incredibly productive. And we can't guarantee Elijah Moore takes that step, especially if they're going to bring in Drake London, who profiles. If Drake London was in the draft last year, he goes way ahead of Elijah Moore. I mean, Drake London's still top 10, 15 pick last year. Elijah Moore was a second rounder. So that has to be in consideration as well.
Yep. I don't disagree. I mean,
man.
I think they're very, very similar because, I mean, hell, the Eagles could take a wide receiver in the first round this year.
Yeah, they probably should.
Well, I could see an easy scenario where they don't. I could see them addressing corner, linebacker, center, defensive end, defensive tackle. I mean, I could see them addressing and not taking a wide receiver in the first round, but taking a wide receiver in the second round. And then we're saying, okay, well, now Devonta Smith is competing with a second round wide receiver. So what does that do? And okay, how do we value Devonta Smith? I mean, they're really, those two wide receivers in particular are in a very, very interesting same tier with each other. And I think the NFL draft is going to change some values and maybe change some perceptions, in the process.
Well, Derek, I should have known that it was going to be impossible for me to keep it under an hour when we bring you on.
You should have never expected that. You should have never. You knew what you're getting yourself into. We talked. What was that? 3 to 4 years ago, we had a contract podcast, and I think we talked about contracts for
like 2 hours.
Oh shit. Well, I mean, it was over an hour and a half. We might have gone almost 2 hours talking about contracts. So you knew what you were getting yourself into. Yeah. Come on.
Do you have anything for us before we get out of here, Derek?
I mean, no, man. I just I plug the work. Follow me on Twitter at @deeper_FFB. All my prospect profiles and things of that nature. We are going to have a Dynasty rookie draft guide for Fantasy Pros that will be live in the coming weeks. But I'm parsing through, writing up prospect profiles. But yeah, check out that. Check out the podcast, man. I've been on the main show. It's been awesome. We've been talking mock drafts, Dynasty, with myself, Joe Pisapia, Pat Fitzmaurice, as well as with Andrew Erickson. This week, Andrew and I are going to be facing off in a cage match for the RB1 title. Breece Hall against Kenneth Walker. It's going to be lit. That is actually Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern in the Fantasy Pros Discord. So head to my timeline, click the link, sign up. Get in there. It's going to be fireworks. It's going to be awesome. We're going to do a bunch of these, actually. So really good debates and be able to hear both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you for coming on, Derek. You got anything, Chris?
Hold on a second. Since we were just talking about it here, hold on 1 second. Hold on.
So they didn't go quarterback.
Y'all remember this right here? Y'all know these people?
Guy for the next 2 seasons.
Yeah, that sounds like us.
Structured. Yeah, I mean, even if
think
they
that's
chose,
me.
they'd have $10 million in dead cap.
Look at this dude right here. Now, this is from just to let y'all know, since we were just talking about it. This is from July 16th, 2018. Man, this is how long we've been going back and forth. I mean, it's been almost 4 years.
Yeah. I remember it. I was podcasting not even in this office. I was in my bedroom sitting on some kind of piece of shit computer, hoping that it wasn't going to die in the process, staring at a wall where I had things pinned up saying, don't say smart things and enunciate.
Yeah.
At the time, man.
No, man.
My God, that takes me back, dude.
No, I just had to take a second to say,
this.
Holy shit, man. I mean, since this is our show and I know we can curse and whatnot, but
yeah.
No, man. I mean, it's been almost 4 years, and I just have to say, Derek, I mean, for the work that you've put in and all the moves that you've made, seeing you go from TQE to FTN and now seeing you over at Fantasy Pros, man, I'm fucking proud of you, man. I'll tell you that straight up. I mean,
love
it's
you
just
guys.
Seeing you put in this work and seeing you get to where you are today, man. It's just been an absolute blessing seeing you get to this point in your career, man. So nothing but love for you, man. I had to pull that clip up because I was like, man, what was it like? How long have we been going back and forth? And I was like, man, dude, has it been a couple of years, 3 years? And so I had to, I pulled up the old Dynasty owners feed, and I was like, man, 2018, 2018, man.
Dynasty owner manual, baby. That was good times, dude. Nah, I got nothing but love, man. As soon as Wilde hit me up about coming on the show, I was like, shit, you really want to start off at the bottom of the hill having me as the first guest? Oh, my Lord, baby. I don't know if you know what you get yourself into. 1, we're going to talk a whole lot. And 2, I mean, look, it's going to be a good time because honestly, I love you guys to death. And
Absolutely.
mad respect to the moves that y'all have made as well. Willie's over at Football Guys, running Showdown stuff over at Run the Sims. Chris is at NBC, baby, as all the other outlets. Like that man's got
Every other outlet.
acronyms and titles and things he's doing for everybody and anybody. So I mean, I'm going to toss this right back to y'all, man. I mean, look, 4 years ago. We're all in different spots and different places and stuff, but should be damn proud of the content y'all put out, man. Y'all have put out really damn good work. We've always talked in DMs, whether it's been DFS or Showdown or all kinds of stuff, man. Mad respect for all the content y'all put out, man. I mean,
it's just a blessing seeing all of us grow over these.
Yeah,
past,
dude. I mean, it's been awesome, and I mean, cheers to the next 4 years.
Absolutely.
I mean, I love it, man. And that's one of the great things about this space. You come into contact with people, we all run in the same circles and stuff, but watching everybody succeed, I think that, social media, people get uppity, they get weird, they get mad, they try to fight each other and turn into keyboard warriors and stuff like that. But for me, it's the connections, it's the people, it's everybody that we've come into contact with through this entire winding ass road that we're all on. That really matters, man. Like all that stuff matters, Like I know I can DM either one of y'all about life, about shit,
Anytime.
trying to smoke a goddamn brisket on a weekend or some shit like that, or hell, just giving you shit about whatever else I saw on the timeline. So mad love and respect for y'all, man. This show is badass. I can't. I'm gonna subscribe to the channel right now, and I can't wait to see what guests y'all are gonna pull on. That are going to supersede myself in the coming weeks and months, man.
Dude, you're gonna love it, man. It's gonna be all the people that we used to kick it with back in the day,
love it.
and still talk to now. So it's gonna be fun, man. Trip down memory lane for sure.
So for Chris, myself, thank you so much for joining us on a NFL show. This is episode 2 with Derek Brown. Join us next week for episode 3 with Jesse Reeves, another Dynasty Owners Manual
already
veteran.
up in the bar.
So that's going to do it for this week. Please like, subscribe, rate, review. We're just starting out, so any subscriptions help us so much. Those rates, those reviews. We're also in podcast form if you don't want to stare at our mugs this whole time. We will catch y'all next time.
Peace.